Well, hello everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Story to Screen podcast, the movie podcast where we review all different kinds of movies, new and old. I am your host, Chris, and today is our first part of our classic movie series, our 10-part classic movie series. Along with me are my compadres. Riding shotgun with me is my usual co-host, Joshua Ling.
The big dog is here, and
Yeah.
he has his 12 gauge or whatever.
What kind of rifle do you have with you?
I said 12 gauge.
Oh, okay. I don't know the names and numbers of all the rifles.
Either. I just know 12 gauge means really big around.
All right, there you go. And
12 gauge is shotgun.
And as you just heard, my left shotgun rider, Benjamin Curley. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, what's up?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Good.
All right. Today we'll be doing Stagecoach, the 1939 classic western directed by John Ford and starring John Wayne. This is their first film together in a massive collaboration that expanded 14 films in their long collaboration together.
Gives Tim Burton and Johnny Depp a run for their money.
How many films have they done?
A lot. I was just joking. I don't think it's that as many, but I was just joking.
Chris Nolan and what's that older guy's name now? I'm
Michael
blanking
Caine.
on it. Yes.
Michael, yeah, he's done 5 films with him. Anyway, before we start, let's go into our weekly segments. Now, we have got to address this because this is just too big of a piece of news. This past, what was it? I think it was Tuesday or Monday. I think it was Tuesday.
Monday afternoon.
Yeah, Monday afternoon. Okay, the Robin Williams passed away Monday. Supposedly, he was found in his home. What I've been able to discover, it was suicide, apparently, which is very, very sad. I mean, I'm really shocked that it's one of those pieces of news that you would not have expected in a million years. It's just one of the most just jaw-dropping pieces of news that you just didn't see coming. I mean, guys, what did you were you guys shocked at what had happened?
No, actually, when it comes to celebrity deaths, usually it's like, oh, so and so died. Oh, okay. I didn't know they were even still alive. Whatever. But with Robin Williams passed away, that's like, whoa, I can't believe that. That actually, I feel some loss there because I grew up with the guy. There's some really good movies that he's done. I mean, we're talking, Hook and Bicentennial Man and just a lot of classics that it's like I was looking forward to seeing years more.
Yeah,
of him.
you thought he was destined to do at least a couple more, or at least a lot more movies. I want to talk about that.
It's like I'm steeling myself against Bill Murray dying because Bill Murray's getting old.
Yeah.
But
that's inevitable.
Yeah.
And then another legend died this week, which was Lauren Bacall. But at least that's an actress that kind of put her mark in cinema, as a whole. But with Robin Williams, he was only 63.
Yeah. Yeah, so no, that's a loss I actually feel for once. It's surprising, and yeah, it's really sad.
He was a person who I did not have a big bond with. I've enjoyed a few of his roles and things. His style of humor tends to be somewhat vaudevillian, or it was tended to be somewhat vaudevillian, and in some cases I enjoy that, in others I find it somewhat annoying in cases. And for him to pass away, I wasn't hugely shocked or surprised, mainly because the main thing that I was always aware of with him were his politics and some of the other things that he believed and talked about, his worldview. And honestly, I see a lot more people with worldviews like him doing things like committing suicide. It's really hard to say that And, some people will say, oh, he was way more conservative than that. Some people will say, no, he was way more liberal. We don't know the man. We can't say specifics. But everything that I have heard from the horse's mouth and seen written by him, a lot of people were shocked, and I can understand that. I'm not saying you shouldn't be shocked. Look at the evidence. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just that from what I had seen of his life, it was one where I went, oh, man, I wish that didn't happen. But I'm not necessarily completely shocked either. And I'm not trying to be down on the guy. I'm not trying to say, anything disparaging about it. But to me, it was something where it didn't surprise me like a lot of people, but it was very, very sad, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And, it's going to be weird. One thing you just kind of mentioned, Benjamin, the future other movies he could have done, he still had like 4 other movies that are going to come out. But my whole thing with Robin Williams as of late, I think he was kind of on this really cold streak as of late, where a lot of the movies he was doing, they weren't really good.
Well, the TV show The Crazy Ones got canceled too.
Yeah.
With him and Michelle Gellar, that got canceled after 1 season, and I know they were pretty crushed by it. I'm not sure exactly what the deal why it was canceled. I think one of the things was it was about an ad agency, and a lot of people still to this day have a, kind of a underlying hatred for free market economy kind of stuff, and are kind of like, oh, this is just selling out, and I think that's the way a lot of people saw that show, as a sellout. Because they mentioned brands by name, and they were working on brand names, and it was kind of free advertising for some of those companies. But yeah, I think the cancellation of that show, Robin Williams, I could tell he was loving it, he was enjoying it, and I can tell Sarah Michelle Gellar was enjoying it. She hadn't been acting in a long time. And yeah, everything I've heard from both of them and the other people on the show were they were crushed by that show being canceled.
I'm assuming it was probably low ratings, or because that's usually the main factor that plays into that. But before we begin our review, why don't we just kind of mention a couple movies that really stand out to us in terms of films that we really appreciated from Robin Williams. Benjamin, why don't you kick us off?
Well, the one that always comes to mind is Hook. I grew up with that.
Same
film.
here.
It's one of my favorites. Yeah, and then a very unique role for Robin Williams was Bicentennial Man. Those are the 2 that I really remember.
The one that first comes to mind for me, being somewhat of an animation guy, is his role as the genie in Aladdin.
Yes, yeah.
I think that is one of his absolute benchmark roles. And that genie wouldn't have been anything without it. And honestly, I don't know that the movie would have been anything without him either. Katzenberg had a very clear vision. He wanted something goofy and silly and fun as opposed to the standard magical Disney. And it is somewhat magical still. It strikes a good balance, and I think ever since that movie's come out, people have tried to replicate it. And the closest I think they've come is Tangled. But any of these other films and stuff that try and do it, sometimes they go way over the top, and sometimes they undershoot it. But more times they go over the top. But
yeah.
I think he was perfectly directed, and the animation was perfectly done, and that's my favorite role of Robin Williams.
Okay, I'm going to defend this movie, and I know a lot of people who don't seem to like this movie. Jumanji.
Oh, I love that one. Yeah,
I love that movie. That is a great. Not only is it a great fantasy movie, it's a great Robin Williams movie as well. But he, just the situation that they were in, the whole board game and the fantasy aspect and all that stuff, and it was kind of I think that was after Jurassic Park, because there is kind of like a kind of a Jurassic Park feel to it with the the wild African animals and all that stuff, but I really like that movie a lot, and there are a lot of people who don't like that movie at all for some weird reason.
That was a good movie, actually. Yeah.
Anyway, let's go ahead and get into something more lighter. Let us go ahead and start a review of Stagecoach.
Did you all hear what the lieutenant said?
What are you trying to do, scare somebody?
If you'll take my advice, ma'am, you won't take this trip.
My husband is with his troops in Dry Fork. If he's in danger, I want to be with him.
All right, folks.
Hey, Curly, why don't you take the cuffs off the kid? He's mighty handy with a gun.
You drive them horses. I'll take care of the kid.
The man works all his life to get a hold of some money so that he can enjoy life, and has to run into a trap like this.
Trap, brother? You mean the Apaches? There's been no sign of them.
You don't see any signs of them. They strike like rattlesnakes.
You talk too much, Gatewood.
Don't threats, don't please.
Take it easy, Gatewood. We may need that fighting before we get to the ferry.
You wouldn't be much good in a fight, you jailbird.
Oh, leave the kid alone. He's handcuffed.
Let's just go ahead and just start with the general impressions of this movie. Was this your... When I told you we were going to be doing this, was this your first time watching this movie, or was this one of several times that you have seen it before? You know, what's your relationship with this movie and your general impressions?
I've seen snippets of this movie. I never actually watched it all the way through, so it was a good watch. Very classic Western. I liked it. I have some thoughts to share on it, but I liked it. And I liked seeing their experimentation in the cinematography and stuff. Some of the old, as they're trying to learn the craft.
My initial impressions were somewhat. I enjoyed the action. I enjoyed a good chunk of the characters. And I think the one thing that stuck out to me as just a slight negative is there wasn't as much humor as I was kind of expecting. Whenever there was humor, I thought it was fantastic. Mm-hmm. But I think that the movie could have benefited from a little bit more humor. That's just a general overview of what I thought. I thought the characters were very good. I thought the story and everything worked really, really well. The only thing that I could say visually, I think there were a lot of... This was almost before the montage was a thing in film, and so it was kind of strange seeing the transitions between legs of the journey. So that was one thing that stuck out to me as well. But those are my general thoughts.
Okay. The humor that you talked about, was it more specifically from the Doc Boone character?
There was a good bit from him, but also from the Stagecoach driver. The name escapes me, but
Andy
his
Devine. Andy Devine.
Voice of Friar Tuck from Disney's Robin Hood.
That's where I know his voice from.
Very
bugging
distinct
me
voice.
so much. I'm like, is it Hal Smith? Who did Mr. Whitaker and Adventures in Odyssey? But
no,
I don't think so. Yeah, it's like I know this voice. Where do I know it from?
From what I understand, he got hit in the throat as a kid on his family farm or whatever, and that distinct squeak in his voice stayed around.
Clears up a mystery for me now.
Yeah. I'm really excited about this movie because, speaking for myself, I am such a huge fan of Westerns, especially the classic, early American Westerns. I just love the depictions of, an early America, trying to, where it was untamed and it still needed to be conquered, even though we were just on the brink of a much more proper civilization, but we still needed to win a lot more fight. There was still, in the law that was kind of, was, the law, of course, was, the sheriff and the marshal and all that stuff, but at the same time, the other law was the swiftness of your ability to, the draw the gun, so to speak. I always view that as an interesting concept, that as much as you have the badge and the marshal and all that stuff, there was a law that, the real law was actually the swiftness of your ability to survive and with the gun and all that stuff, and there's the pioneers and all that stuff, and this period in history just always fascinated me, and I just love westerns, especially of what these two managed to do together, and well, what are your general impressions of westerns? I mean, are you guys big fans of westerns as well?
Yeah, I am. I've trying to think name off some of the westerns I've seen. Most of the John Wayne westerns, if not all of them. I think just a few that I haven't seen. And then the Clint Eastwood films. Love those. And then one of my favorites is Once Upon a Time in the West, and that's a really classic, groundbreaking film in some ways, at least as far as the musical score goes. And no, I do love westerns. I grew up on westerns quite a bit. And
Same here.
they're like right behind World War II films. Those are my top favorites.
Yeah.
I think in my growing up, there were a couple that were interesting to me, but I tended to like the serials and the TV shows more than the movies. I watched a fair amount of the first one that comes to mind, most importantly to me anyway, is Zorro, which is definitely a different kind of Western. But Zorro, I would definitely consider that a Western, the Guy Williams Zorro series. And then also, some of the others that stick out in my mind are The Lone Ranger and, Bonanza to a certain extent, a little bit of some of the more tame ones, like A Little House on the Prairie kind of thing. You know,
that doesn't count.
it's pioneers. It may not be Western, but it's pioneers.
I would consider it. It's set in the American West, so I'm not denying that.
What about the Davy Crockett films?
Yes, Davy Crockett was something I definitely watched a good bit growing up. Disney was a major thing in our house, so any of the old Disney stuff with Western frontier pioneers and stuff I tended to really like. You could count Old Yeller and Western type stuff a little bit, but it's not, gunslinger type Western, that sort of thing. So to me, I think my general exposure to Westerns was more the TV shows, and it's going to be interesting for me to go through some of these. I never disliked Westerns. It's just something that I haven't delved into a whole lot yet. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on this.
Okay. Let me just read, for our audience, a brief little synopsis, just a small one real quickly, for Stagecoach. A group of people traveling on a stagecoach find their journey complicated by the threat of Geronimo and learn something about each other in the process. That's just a little synopsis of the film. I do want to say something about this Western, because, it's been debated amongst film critics and film historians, but this was kind of the first real, deep, psychological adult Western of its time. When you look at other Westerns, historically speaking at this point in time, you had the Iron Horse, a movie directed by John Ford. You also had, The Big Trail, which starred John Wayne, a very young John Wayne, but that movie was a huge flop, unfortunately, and it put him into the B westerns for a very long time, but I've seen the movie. I don't know if any of you've seen The Big Trail, but I would recommend it if you're going to do a class on wagon trains and that type of thing. And it's a really neat film, very wonderfully shot. But it was the John Carter of its time. It was a huge mega flop, if that makes any sense.
That's a shame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you also had Cimarron, which was kind of one of the first Western. It was one of the early Best Picture winners of the 30s, 1930, I believe, but I could be wrong on that date. But that Western, those Westerns really didn't have these complex characters like Stagecoach has. What Stagecoach has differently from those were all these different, this is a character-driven film, but I really kind of see this movie more as an exploration of these characters than it is a character, driven film. I mean, yeah, it's character-driven, but it feels more like a movie that explores these characters in a very minimal way, but it's done in a way that's really, really fascinating. You don't really get to know. You only get to know I would say, 25% of these characters' past. Some of the things.
It's all intrigue.
It's all intrigue. But I think that's what works about this movie, was that you had, the one character that you do kind of understand, his motivations and where he's coming from, which is the Ringo Kid. He was sent to prison for the wrong reasons, for a murder that he didn't commit. And then arguably Dallas, it isn't really stated straight up as to why or what drives her, but she's kind of this character that's, not to use kind of using the term loosely, kind of a victim of her own circumstances, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and I really liked how the film kind of played with their relationship, and also just the other relationships as well. And in a way, I actually think this movie, because the significance of this movie, I think, played in a very important effect, not just on the genre. Well, it did play an important effect, have an important effect on the genre because of this movie. I don't think you would have had movies like Shane or High Noon, because those are specifically Shane, because that's a very complex, or that deals with a very complex protagonist to some degree. Here you have a gunslinger who's trying to escape his past, and trying to find a normal life for himself.
One thing I wanted to point out specifically with the characters you're saying, they very minimally explained them. I think one of them we arguably knew enough about to kind of get who he was the marshal, the sheriff himself.
Oh, really? Okay.
He in particular had one goal in mind. The whole entire goal was to get them there safely, and then also looking for Ringo Kid. That was his big thing. Once he found Ringo Kid, it was get Ringo Kid back to the clink. Get this stuff taken care of. His whole entire purpose and driving factor is the law. And in some ways that drives the story forward because he has a mission to complete and he's going to complete it. The rest of them are, they flip-flop here or there as to their motives and stuff, but the one constant motive is the sheriff and the marshal, and it's very black and white. He's the good guy. He's going to make sure all this stuff is taken care of. He is the law. Yeah. So, just one particular thing I wanted to point out on that. As far as the influence of the movie, Benjamin, did you have anything on that?
Was there a character that kind of stood out to you that really intrigued you?
Not especially, no. I mean, the character, it was very clear that this was supposed to be a film you walk away from trying to think deeply about. Mm-hmm. And Holly pointed out some stuff, and I guess we'll get into it a little bit more later. But
you can go ahead and share them now if you like.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just the town that they were trying to get to, Lordsburg. That's the name,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, Lordsburg.
Well, that's the city of the Lord, and loosely translated. And so it's really funny how these two characters, Ringo and Dallas, they're both the outsiders. Society, there's the societal outsiders, and he lives outside the town. It's just very clear that they're not welcome in the Lord City. It's just, there's supposed to be a message there, and I'm not sure I agree with it, but...
Okay, we can talk about that a little later.
Just found that really intriguing as far as the story and characters go.
As far as Dallas, I think it's pretty much hinted at all the way through and during this time. And I think it was well done. I think there could have been one or two more things you could have done to really hint at what she is. But I just want to make sure we're on the same page. We all kind of get the impression that she was a harlot?
A prostitute.
Yeah.
But you also have to take in consideration, Joshua, that this is also the pre-code era. So there were a lot of things that you couldn't really... specifically address on the screen, so some things to imply certain things.
Yeah. I'm saying I think they could have implied it better than they did. I think it was well implied, but I think they could have done a little bit more. I'm not saying show anything. I'm not saying say anything. I'm saying there are visuals that you can give about her and where she lives and all this kind of stuff that makes sense. The one that made sense the most was where there were these other dressed up women and stuff around somewhat seedy area. That's really the only point where I went, okay, yes.
It's like, okay, she's gonna stop here, isn't she? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so it was a thing that I kind of got, but I think it could have been implied a little bit better than it was. I'm still saying keep it implications, don't outright say it. I think that's something that is lost in filmmaking today to a certain extent, to imply those sort of things.
Yeah, when we can show everything, why not, right?
I would prefer this route, implications as opposed to showing you everything,
Exactly. Absolutely. I am full on agreeing. I just think it could have been implied better.
Yeah.
Than it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you don't really know if she's just this saloon girl or she's just the local harlot. But
okay, well, good to hear y'all had that problem too, because it threw me for a little bit. Because I was having trouble hearing the dialogue. It's like, did I miss something? Did I? I think I get where this is going.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Again, it's just implications. But yeah, I think that's what you guys made some really good points. And one character that kind of was the what's his name again? The Gatewood character. That's a character that is kind of, I would say he's underdeveloped, but here is this respected, supposedly a person who's in a respected position, the banker, and here he is trying to steal the company's money for mysterious reasons that we just don't quite understand. He's just trying to get out of town. I think he's just not really fond of his wife. I think that's probably the problem there.
He's afraid of the cult of women that apparently run the town. That's kind of what I got. It was a little strange. I'm not gonna lie. Like, okay, are they vampires or something?
Especially that one woman, the one who had looked like a...
Yep.
Yeah, that one lady. It was kind of underdeveloped, but because he doesn't really have much of an end goal just to get out of town specifically, but there was actually a remake that was made in 1966 where in that movie the banker is actually in cahoots with Plumber, the villain at the end of the movie.
Okay.
In the remake, which I liked that a little bit more, and I think this is maybe the remake in some ways is superior to that movie. And that in some ways the movie is kind of explores the characters a little bit more. It's a little bit longer than this one, but yeah, that movie I think the remake I think is somewhat superior in terms of exploring the characters. But this movie I think does a very good job of kind of setting up the characters and giving you hints here and there about all these different things.
Definitely. I'll point out one other thing. This was one of the main last things that I had as far as wanted to point out. She has got, Miss Mallory, I think, she's got to be the skinniest pregnant woman alive.
I know. Holly she blurts out, it's like, oh yeah, because she's pregnant. I'm like, when did I miss that?
It's not very, that baby must be really highly underfed for her to, okay.
She's like wearing a corset while she's pregnant. I'm like, that's not a good thing.
That baby's gonna come out really, really thin. He's gonna look more like he's gonna look like a spaghetti noodle when he comes out.
Reals, man.
John Carradine. I don't know if any of you know this actor. He was the one who played Hatfield, the gambler character. That's a really interesting character that we don't really get to know.
I know. I was really wanting to know more about him. It's like, whoa, there's so much backstory there, but where did he get this? How does he know that?
To me, he was almost like a red herring character. Like the whole point of him being there is for you to suspect him of things that he actually didn't do.
Yeah.
It's kind of oddly implied that there may have been some sort of past relationship between her and Mrs. Mallory.
Yeah.
Something was...
Yeah. Or some kind of connection. I think they talked about him and he talked to her about her father or something.
Yeah, serving in a regiment back then.
Yeah. So, I do find interesting the very, very slight way they barely mentioned and talked about the Confederacy and the Union. It was the war, and then the one time that they yell each other about what the war should be called, and I'm like, we're still yelling about what the war should be called. we're not even using the names that they used anymore, and it's funny to me that even then, maybe even more so then, they had to be very cautious about how and what they said about that.
Yeah.
Because it's meant for a mass audience. And there were still a lot of people, like there's still a lot of people today that are still mad at Mr. Sherman for burning Atlanta and all that stuff. So.
There you go.
It was still the best tactical decision.
I'm not gonna
You guys want to go into it? Go ahead.
No. I'm not going to lie about being a good tactical decision, but it was also just, sometimes the best tactical decision is heartless at the same time. And you go, what do you what are you actually fighting for, and at what point is it okay wise to do it? So
yeah, definitely. Little Civil War argument right there, ladies and gentlemen. Don't worry, anything.
I think we both see eye to eye on it. It was a very unfortunate war that shouldn't have ever happened.
You, Doc? I'm not only a philosopher, sir. I'm a fatalist. Somewhere, sometime, there may be the right bullet or the wrong bottle waiting for Josiah Boole. Why worry when or where? Yes or no? Having that philosophy, sir, I've always courted danger. During the late war, when I had the honor to serve the Union under our great president, Abraham Lincoln, and General Phil Sheridan, well, sir, I fought meat shot and shell and cannon raw. Do you want to go back or not? No. I want another drink. That's 5.
Let's talk about Monument Valley. That place is just astonishing to behold. I mean,
and can I just say that there is nothing that beats the dynamic range of film. Just to be able to get those shadows and the clouds, and just to capture all of that in one, and not crush the blacks, and just it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
I gotta ask you, you've seen other movies that have had that use the Monument Valley background. Do you prefer it in black and white or in color?
That's a really hard question. It really is pretty both ways.
I know.
I couldn't decide on that. Yeah.
I was just pointing out, it's kind of weird to me. I definitely think it's gorgeous, but it's one of those places where I'm like, I definitely don't want to actually be there because it's going to be ridiculous. You know what I mean?
I would love to visit there sometime, but yeah, I understand. It's going to be hot, and there's going to be...
I'm going to be like, yeah, it's beautiful, but I'm so uncomfortable. Can we leave?
Can we just take a photo and go?
Yeah.
But I think I prefer, I mean, the color does show, I think the color does kind of show more of its grandeur and its beauty in color format, but the black and white, you still get this, you're almost, I think this was actually the first movie that was shot in Monument Valley, believe it or not. So this was actually, they didn't go on to the California desert locations or anything like that. All this was shot in Monument Valley. I think the black and white just captured this sense of, just a deeper sense of mystery. You just want to, it makes you anticipate for when you want to see it in color, but it just shows you, it just gives you that sense of of deeper mystery of this place.
Intrigue once again.
And Ford has managed to capture that place in so many beautiful ways. I mean, in a lot of his westerns, I mean, he used it in Fort Apache, in his Fort Apache, The Searchers, which is beautifully shot in that movie. Also, My Darling Clementine. And I think even last year's The Lone Ranger, I believe, was shot down there as well, and that has some really good cinematography in there. Just the way that the mountains are shaped. I mean, obviously it was the cause of from the flood, from Noah the flood and all that stuff, but it just looks like God just said, okay, this place right here, I'm gonna do some molding right here, and God just used his hands, and he just pressed down on this big piece of, this dirt, and he just pushed all of it down, and just made it so majestic and grand. It's just these big, boulder mountains. You look at those mountains, it's like, I can't even climb. They look unclimbable is the proper term. Yeah. And it's just amazing to behold. Just so gorgeous.
Hold it! Whoa, steady, ho. Hey, look, it's Ringo. Yeah. Hello, kid.
Hello, Curly. Didn't expect to see you riding shotgun on this run, Marshal. Going to Lordsburg?
I figured you'd be there by this time.
Well, it looks like you got another passenger.
Yeah. I'll take the Winchester.
You may need me in this Winchester, Curly. Saw a ranch house burning last night.
You know what we forgot to mention? John Wayne. What'd you guys think of him in his kind of his 19th film.
Yeah, Thin. I've seen a few of the really old westerns that he did, where he's really young, and they've been good. And I think this is the youngest I've seen him, and enjoyed it. I think the other one's just like, he's still fining. But no, he seems to have hit off his iconic look and way of talking and everything. He seems to have defined it in this film. And I enjoyed it a lot. And yeah, no, it's like, man, it's weird seeing him without the belly. And I'm used to seeing him in a lot of the Civil War films or whatever, where he's he's the commander, he's got his horse, and he's got that beer belly going on already.
Or just bigger, broad body,
Yeah, big man, tall, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And here it's just lean and all that stuff. Joshua.
I think he did a good job portraying the character. The character of Ringo in particular. I didn't necessarily catch that he was wrongly imprisoned, but it may have been a thing to me. Like, I don't know if it was specifically said, but this is just what I gleaned from it. I kind of got this feeling that he was in a position where he did what he thought had to be done because he felt pressed against a wall kind of situation. And he's still dealing with the fact that he made some bad decisions. And I think that's something that you get out of him is regardless of whether he was wrongly imprisoned or not, he's still owning up to his actions.
Mm-hmm.
That he's willing to go back to prison.
Yep, and he's willing to do whatever it takes to get things done, and he realizes it's a very long road up ahead. I think that's something very common in a lot of heroes and stories, and something that's going to stay in dark heroes and anti-heroes for a long, long time. One of the more recent ones that I can think of that's similar, and it's an interesting parallel, because I was watching the TV show earlier, is Angel from Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. In Angel, his whole entire goal is to sort of atone, it's not necessarily theologically correct, but it's the idea of atoning for the sins that he's committed in the past, that he knows that this is a hard road up ahead, but he has to do it, and he's very determined to do it. And that's something that I really got out of Ringo and out of John Wayne's performance. I definitely enjoyed it, and it was a good anti-hero who wanted to come back to the light, but society didn't want him.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think was very interesting. He's torn because he wants to, right himself, make his, clear his name and all that kind of stuff, but on the other hand, he wants to take down the plumbers. He wants them so bad.
Yeah.
And so there's kind of a torn nature there that he's dealing with constantly, and he just knows that he has to fight, but he also knows that he may never come back to society, and he's somewhat mourning that.
Yeah. And you see it, and you get that implication in that one scene at the dinner scene when, the people think, the people that move down the table he thinks that the reason why they're kind of disregarding him is he thinks it's himself. But in reality, it's Dallas. I don't think they could care less about, Ringo. I think it's more about the lady, but I think he gets that impression that he can't.
Well, yeah, he's a stranger to them. They're like, yeah, whatever, But, the
reaction was, I
they
think
despise. Yeah.
I think they see that they can get something out of Ringo as opposed to Dallas. Dallas, they didn't know that they would need her. They ended up needing her to help with Miss Mallory, but they didn't.
That swayed them a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, there wasn't any need for Dallas, but there was a need for a good gun, and so they didn't care if it was Ringo or not.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of guns, what did you guys think of the third act action scene, the stagecoach scene? That is. I'm going to say this. This is probably, for a time that, with no computers, no CGI, none of that stuff. All this was, practical effects. Everything was practical. Everything was done in camera. All of it was physical. That stagecoach scene, or the chase scene with the Indians, is probably one of the best action scenes. And it's such an intimate little, it's really big and it's massive, but when it's a black and white movie, it kind of feels a little bit more intimate and small. but it's so great the way that they shot it at the same time. You know, Stagecoach at that time becomes battleship. it becomes a battle station, and I love how the guys are just.
Oh yeah, every window they can get on, and yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's just an amazingly shot and just very well choreographed stagecoach scene or chase scene. What did you guys think of it?
I think the first thing that came to mind for me was, wow, that was fantastic, but also, wow, how much money would that have cost in 1939? That was the other thing that blew me away. They had to get all those people out there to the valley, and they had to do all the shooting. They had to have vehicles that could move alongside, you know, everything to have those moving shots, and it blew me away the amount of money and time and effort that went into something like this in the hot sun, no less. It just amazed me. I'm like, I survived. You know how in Lord of the Rings they had the "I survived Helm's Deep" kind of T-shirts. I could totally see them having shirts for this if they made screen prints and stuff back then. I survived I survived Stagecoach scene. You know, whatever.
Yeah,
it was pretty amazing.
And I was just feeling for the stuntman there. It's like, oh, I bet he came out of that with some cracked ribs or whatever. It's like that one guy who went underneath the stagecoach. It's like, I hope he survived that.
Oh, he did. And believe it or not, he would later direct the chariot race scene in Ben-Hur.
Nice.
Seriously.
Yakima Canutt. He is the Bob Anderson of stuntmen. And Bob Anderson is for many fans is, you know, for movie buffs is the master of swordsmanship in Hollywood. He trained a lot of actors. I mean, he also did the sword training in Lord of the Rings, but But Yakima Canutt is one of those legends amongst stuntmen. I mean, he did some, you know, iconic stunt work. I mean, like just what we saw, you know, in Stagecoach, and also in Ben-Hur as well. He directed a lot of the stunt work in that movie, and he also did the scene where the Ringo Kid is jumping from horses to
yeah, that was
horses.
Cool.
Amazing stuff, man. I mean, this is some really amazing stunt work that, you know, that didn't require any CGI. I mean, you look at that stuff and it's amazing. Ben, you kind of brought up something concerning, you know, Lordsford and all that stuff and how you kind of view this as a... What was the point you were going to make about that concerning Dallas and the Ringo Kid?
Not too much. It's just, that was something that just really struck me funny is I wonder what message John Ford was trying to convey with that, because it's actually kind of obvious there. I didn't catch it. I have to actually give Holly the credit for that one.
Thank you, Holly.
Yeah, it's just it was really interesting. It's like, okay, is he trying to say that our good people are outside of the city, or that all the good people are hypocrites, or what's he trying to say there? And that just kind of left it hanging. I haven't really pondered it very much.
I was just going to say, you know, the Lord's City is kind of how you were loosely translating it. To me, it's just straight up, these people aren't welcome there.
Mm-hmm.
Ringo and Dallas are not welcome there. Now, obviously, we know Jesus came to save the lost. But as far as, you know, Lordsburg, you know, if you translate it more Jehovah, if you're doing that sort of thing, you're talking about God the Father, it can be more of like, this is a city of God's law, this, you know, that sort of thing. If you go to that extent, kind of think about it that way, it would make sense, because they fall short, very, very short of the glory of God, and these other people have definitely judged them and don't consider them part of their society. And so I think the whole point of it is they both don't want to go there because they know what's going to happen there, but they both know that they have to go there.
I always saw the ending as kind of you people needed to just get away, go into exile, and figure out your problems there in exile, and try to get it resolved.
I think, you know, part of it was more of a, you know, the marshal said, okay, you finished your goal, you've paid your dues by saving our lives is the way he thinks of it. It's not necessarily that way theologically, but I think it's more, you help save people, you've done good, and so now I'm rewarding you with good.
Yeah. Again, I think the movie is trying to, it's kind of implying your good works will redeem you type of way, which that's something that I kind of go back and forth with on films. It just depends on the individual, or it depends on which,
well, is it true redemption, or are there still consequences that need to be paid? Some people
that's a good point. What you just said, true redemption. That's the thing. I think that's a good analogy right there. But go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
I was just thinking that, was John Wayne's character truly redeemed? We don't know. Was Dallas truly redeemed? We don't really know. They don't really go into that, and obviously we can't see the hearts of man. We can't see the hearts of characters unless we write them,
Yeah.
But the point of it is, to me anyway, that we don't really know, but as far as the marshal was concerned, his job was to reward the good deeds. That was his thought. I don't agree with that process. His job is to bring consequences, period.
Yeah.
And throughout the movie, that's what he was trying and planning on doing. But I think he was so touched by all that Ringo had done for them that he felt the need to repay it.
No, that's a good point. I never thought of that before. But that's a good point.
I mean, I think the biggest takeaway from this, though, is that they're each human. They're human in their own way. We've got our extremely selfish character. We've got the other one who just indulges his passion. We've got, they're all human, and they rub each other wrong, but when worse comes to worse, that's all you've got in that setting. I think that's what he's trying to say, perhaps.
And I think that connects to, our previous review at Guardians of the Galaxy, too. Is you can have some of the worst depraved sorts of humans and things, but if the situation is right and people band together and work together, they can accomplish amazing things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that we can take away from this and from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah. But then I think as Christians, I was just looking up a verse here, and it's from 1 John 1:9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. That's the spiritual missing link in this movie is that action right there.
Well, kid, I told you not to follow me.
Dallas. I asked you to marry me, didn't I?
I'll never forget to ask me, kid. That's something.
Wait here.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up our show. Ben, Josh, thank you for taking the time to come out and do this movie with me, and I'm looking forward to the next 9 movies that we'll be doing. Just let our audience...
The countdown begins.
What?
And the countdown begins.
Yes. Our next classic movie will be Sergeant York, which is directed by Howard Hawks. So that will be on our next schedule. Joshua, where can people find more of your work?
They can check me out, my stories, over at rhymeandspace.com. That's like time and space, but rhyme and space. You can see some of my superhero stories and the like over there.
Most of my stuff is at indyvfx.com. That's INDYVFX.com.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for this episode. And we'll catch you next week with our review on Sergeant York. Have a good night, everybody.
See you later.
Well, they're saved from the blessings of civilization.
Yeah. Doc, I'll buy you a drink.
Just one.